The economics of nation states today is an absolute nonsense. The reality is our economy is a basket case. It's actually an extraordinary social commentary on the nature of the jobs that we create today and the hell of the jobs that we create today for human beings to live decent, fulfilling lives.
Everyone here will be intensely aware of the increasingly critical global situation. There are wars everywhere from Myanmar to Ukraine to Yemen, and of course the ongoing massacre in Gaza. Institutions of higher education, more and more driven by the profit motive, have become heavily reliant for research funding from weapons manufacturers and other defence contractors, all of whom, of course, have an increasingly visible presence on university campuses. So in this context, several questions arise. How can university workers promote peaceful citizenship in an institutional environment that increasingly normalizes militarism? Is it possible to defend or reclaim the university as a force for enlightened values and social benefit? And how can a consideration of historical peace movements, contemporary anti-war activism, or other decolonial practices provide resources for doing so?
I think we can fairly reasonably say that all academic disciplines are involved in war, whether that's policy or the more physical and practical perspectives, shall we say. Sometimes these links can be very unclear and the ethical boundaries can be very complex. Some fields, however, it's, I think, a little more black and white in that we have a direct involvement in the arms industry, particularly engineering and physical sciences. They're a fundamental prerequisite for the development of arms and munitions, and particularly postgraduate research and the recruitment of undergraduates is a huge part of how arms firms work. Without that, they cannot function. And so is doing a degree in this area in a way making you complicit? It's a challenging thing to consider. And in particular, I'm going to talk about a field that many of you may not have come across called material science. It kind of sits between almost physics, chemistry, and engineering. In brief, it's designing materials. Now, you may wonder, why is material science in particular have an arms problem more so than other physical sciences and engineering? And I would argue that it's actually a very historic thing. The Industrial Revolution really was a revolution of material science, and these are driven, unfortunately, by arms and munitions development departments, particularly in the UK, are built on aerospace development. Historically, undergraduate and postgraduate degrees and research grants have acted as a direct pipeline for money in, R&D knowledge out, students in, employees out. A huge part of that is actually through the UKRI provide capital to a university. University has partners, often companies, particularly arms firms, and they do research that is useful to everyone involved. Now, the arms firms aren't getting direct money from this. They're just getting the knowledge out at the end. So quantifying how much benefit they get from this can be challenging. Demilitarisation have done some pretty impressive work in scraping this from databases like the Grants on the Web. An arms firm comes to a university and says, we would like to pay you to look at airflow around this missile, rather than in the first route where it might be more, we're going to study airflow and it's going to have dual use and you might be able to use it for a missile. On route 2, it's much more direct. In this case, firms are looking for a return on their investment. Just looking at the EPSRC's funding, of the 20 largest recipient partner firms, 8 of them are arms firms. 40% of the largest part of the groups for engineering and physical sciences research. And this again is UK government money. So this is just the current funding that is liable from the EPSRC. Sheffield getting 31% of their grants are partnering with the defence firms. And then you look at it and say, that accounts for 73% of their research funding. So by and large, disproportionately, defence-related projects are the biggest money. You'll note some very, very big names there. Southampton, Birmingham, Bristol, Cambridge, Cranfield, Imperial. These are very big institutions, and there is almost no data available on how much funding is flowing and in what way. students aren't aware that this is going on in their departments. I think a lot of this comes down to the core problem we have in engineering and physical sciences is how engineering ethics are talked about. In medicine, you talk about doing no harm. It's all about the end result for the patient. In engineering, it's how you do it. It's not what you're doing. It's all focused on how engineering is done in a professional way. And so there's no real discussion of the ethics of what you're doing as your end. Just making fellow students aware that this is happening within your department, I think, is a huge step forward. So challenging this from within engineering schools may be more effective than trying to affect entire institutional change, because we all know trying to move the needle at an institutional level, it's damn difficult. So through conscious substitution of funding at a research level, pushing academics to say, I'm going to divest my research from arms is one route, and expansion of the curriculum to cover the culture of ethical ramifications in what we do as engineers and physical scientists, I think is key route forward.
War and militarism is very understudied within social science and sociology, and it's quite difficult to get people to connect the dots up, see how actually it's all part of the same wider picture. Often it's particular academics who are required to take on risks and experience quite heavy pressure, teaching difficult subjects. Dangerous subjects refers to topics that attempt to address the wrongs of heteronormativity, patriarchy, colonialism, nationalism, capitalism, war. So what does this actually look like within the university? Well, it might manifest as issues around a lacking representation or diversity amongst staff or students, a dearth of teaching, particularly in relation to racism, gender, sexuality and disability. For some of us, the university provides the spark to ignite our political consciousness. For others, it's the site where neoliberalism's racialized, gendered, classist, ableist hostilities further engender our alienation. Many can attest to how these experiences are not mutually exclusive. As Khan points out, a classroom, even though it's designed as an anti-racist and feminist classroom, can be sympathetic to these desires. But at the same time, we have to remain aware of the ways in which educational sites remain places that are structured by and reproduce the same violence that they purport to address. So we need to remain skeptical of this idea that the university can become a place of refuge or safety. Something else needs to happen in the classroom in order to help us face power, inequality and social change. Khan proposes a hopeful approach to teaching in the university, given the ghostly aspects of social life or the kind of difficult and painful wider context of the world that we don't leave behind. A reparative approach to the challenges of teaching. An attempt to repair the hurt and suffering can be discovered if we focus on our relationships with each other and our connections to each other. So I was conscious actually that all I was really trying to do was provide students with some tools in the toolkit they already had to connect up struggles across time and space and within a history of radical ideas, which they needed and could use to deploy outside of the classroom against the university and elsewhere. Social movements start on the streets and then spread to university campuses, and that's always the way things have been. So this doesn't mean that universities and university staff and students don't play a significant role in insurrections and revolutions, but that universities are not themselves transformative or radical spaces. And the impulse to simply reform the institution to try and make it better or more palatable, rather than to dismantle it and rebuild it and make it more radical, is often a very strong impulse and is often the impulse that prevails. A lot of social movements fail because they try to change the university in ways that universities cannot change. Universities are not engines of social transformation. That's the work of political education and activism that happens outside the university. Resistance is the true path to healing and reparation.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the militarisation of academia. I started to realise that there wasn't that much written about militarisation of British politics and society, or even the effectiveness of the military in fighting their wars. It's quite difficult to publish critical stuff of the military in British academia because academics who are quite closely related to the military can, in effect, spike your publications. So my interest is really about how the contact with the military helps to shape debates around war. And war studies, based at King's College London, has the prestige of academia while being close to the MOD. And in fact, war studies was partly founded by MOD money. And now defence studies at KCL provides academic staff to Shrivenham and the Defence Academy. And That contract's worth 50 million over 10 years. So King's College London then have a vested interest in maintaining close relationships with the MOD in order that they keep that contract. And the staff of the Defence Academy are employed, and that's often a springboard into a university academic career where they will sit in departments of politics or strategic studies. There are some critical scholars in war studies as well. War studies at King's flourishes, contrasting with the decline of peace studies at the University of Bradford, which has shrunk and changed over time.
Why is it that the subject of race is often not engaged in discussions of military violence when we can see so clearly that the lives of some are deemed more important than the lives of others? I'm struck by how far people will go to avoid speaking about race, or speaking about it in a meaningful way, a way that could help us to understand why the world continues to be organized along a continuum of the human, the not quite human, and the non-human, as Alex Wehelier puts it. Race, which I understand as a technology for the management of human difference, the main goal of which is the production, reproduction, and maintenance of white supremacy on both a local and a planetary scale. When our critics say talking about race is unhelpful, my answer is, well, who is it unhelpful to? Europeans posit their mission of global colonial domination from the 15th century on as one of civilizational destiny. The aim of extracting from and exploiting indigenous land and labor in the majority of the world was dressed up in the costume of innovation and ingenuity. All nations are founded on the idea that they have this unique destiny. The fact that the majority of the world is united in its expression of solidarity with Palestine, while the few states that continue to hold the most global power, those of the global north, stand with Israel, is seen as proof that anti-Semitism mainly comes from those who the revolutionary anti-colonial psychiatrist Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth. The role of race as a global project that propels and secures the dominance of Western civilization can be seen in the pronouncements of Israel and its supporters, not least the president back in December, in words that I'm sure you will remember. As Ruth Wilson Gilmore writes, militarism is a key mechanism through which racial classifications are maintained. The military-industrial complex relies then on race, which makes some lives killable and others grievable. While many universities claim to be committed to anti-racism, diversity, and even decolonization, none of these are being practiced while Zionism is normalized. And I believe that we are at a turning point when perhaps we could in fact see the end of Zionism in our lifetime.
I think it's fair to say that we are at war generally. University spaces are battlegrounds, right? I don't think it's a space which we should just be wholly consumed by, but it's also not a space that we should just leave, because it's clear both ideologically and materially, these are very important spaces for the development and generation of kind of just, liberational, anti-militarist, anti-racist, anti-imperial social relations. And Chomsky talks about when you have like critical thought and things in the university that's against the university, that you kind of like small in the university, which nobody really cares about, that can kind of push you to the side. But you start getting bigger, that's when they need to start coming down on it. We have people that join Student Union Council trying to vote through motions and things like that. And every time we were met with delays in meetings by the student government, when we managed to push for BDS motion, there would always be some reason why they couldn't do it. And I think these kind of experiences, amongst me and many other kind of student activists of universities, when you kind of go through the formulaic protocols that they kind of tell you to do, okay, well, we have ethical investment policies and things like that. So what you need to do is you need to take this to the student council. And that just seemed to never work. And even when we were developing organizations across university campuses, there'd always be something, even if we got the votes through, there would tend to be something that university administration would kind of bring up in order to prevent kind of any full momentum happening. If we're not being listened to by using kind of more formal means, we're going to have to use informal means to actually get our point across in our kind of anti-militarist practice in regards to Palestine and the university. But surely if we are thinking about decolonizing the university, as has been mentioned previously, universities as fundamentally imperialist institutions, colonial institutions born out of colonial histories, then it's not enough to obviously just change our curriculums around. We need to do something material. We need to do something actually practical to change the social relations that reproduce universities as systems of accumulation, as systems that not only ideologically, justify colonization, imperialism around the world, or war, but materially, because if universities are these massive institutions of accumulation, they really have all these millions of pounds worth of investments in fossil fuels, in the arms companies, in companies which uphold Israeli apartheid. We really actually have a not only moral but kind of concrete material duty to actually use the momentum that's being built around Palestine at the moment, to use these spaces that we actually have to break these links.
Pro-war propaganda, are we doing it by accident? Are we, by accident, helping support pro-war propaganda? Start with the term defence and the way in which it's become synonymous with militaries, but we should question that, and I'm going to argue we should not be using that term. After the Second World War, war offices were renamed Ministries of Defence, and that was part of a progressive move to label militaries as something that was a bit more desirable. And the implications of this is that defence is a good thing, and if you argue against it, you must be irrational. And therefore, peacekeepers who argue against defence are irrational, and they're not bothered about keeping us safe. So I want to argue that we need to move away from this language. I've listed a few things which have been recently labelled as defensive military actions: the US, UK invasion of Iraq, Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Israeli invasion of Gaza, arms exports to Saudi Arabia, etc. To call it defence is to make defence meaningless as a term. So the implication is that we should stop using defence as a term to cover all military situations. It's not accurate, it's not objective, it is a political framing intended to undermine criticism. And so I would always encourage you to just drop that term completely. It's not defence. It's not defence forces, it's not defence industry. Some weapons, some armed forces are often described as deterrents. Nuclear deterrent is the most common usage in the UK. And again, it's used to hide threat of large-scale violence. Military action that involves threats against civilians or actual attacks on civilians tend to be actions that fail more often than the ones that are focused on military hardware. So, this is hidden within those terms as well. Smart weapons is another term that gets bandied around too much, but the military uses it so often. The idea is that it's only bad guys will be hit by these very clever weapons, which of course are not very clever and they're very precise, except they're not very precise. And it's often applied to things like a 1,000-pound bomb with a computer guidance system on it. And of course, you've still got casualties in the surrounding area and the potential for the targets to be misidentified. Militaries try to associate themselves with more positive elements in society, like science and technology, in order to sort of give themselves a positive association, generate what's called social license. And of course, this helps them create the pipeline of bringing in young scientists into arms companies and the military itself. We have a new section of our website called Globally Responsible Careers, which is a sort of questionnaire that takes students through questions around what they would like to do with their career and how it would contribute towards the Sustainable Development Goals. The importance of trying to build links with some of the green industries, renewable energy and health sector, international development agencies, and show that there are different career options there. There are so many alternatives out there.
What is education for? What has happened to our educational values to mean that we are now a marginalized group of people who are critical of the fact that the military industrial complex has such a large capacity over our education? I believe that education and the shift that we should see is not just the divestment from education arms, but also reinvestment into making sure that these knowledge centres are being used to build economic transformation that we need to see for our survival. I wasn't really aware of the deep roots of the crush of the education system, but this was a part of making sure that people that went through that system were obedient members of the workforce and the military. That really, for me, is fundamental in us understanding why people are so afraid to talk about genocide today, why they're so confused about our current defense strategy and how we talk about it. The the ahs, the buts, it's complicated. They literally went through an education system that is meant to suck hope. It's meant to take people away from the fact that imagination is much more important than knowledge. And if we aren't able to look beyond what we currently have, use our imaginations to build better, then we're going to be stuck in the same rhetoric, these same systems which kill the poor. We envision a world where universities champion peace, not war. Education is not memorizing that Hitler killed 6 million Jews. Education is understanding how millions of ordinary Germans were convinced that it was required. Education is learning how to spot the signs of history repeating itself. We now need to have preventionary methods taking prominent capacity of our educational and knowledge centers space so that we don't have to go through the painstaking reality of watching it again. Of course, we can't talk about this problem without discussing the privatization of education. It was estimated in 2015 that the UK allocated £239 million to conflict prevention, while the defence budget was £36 billion, 152 times greater than the conflict prevention budget. Forces Watch's research has demonstrated that since 2012 to 2016, nearly £90 million has been spent in lower education to promote military ethos. There needs to be a revitalization of the agenda of peace, and the fact that our education system can share and does share those values is prominent in making that happen. We have positioned ourselves as a bridge between what's happening with students and the way that the institution itself is being resistant to it, helping to build continuity between the movements and connecting different campus campaigns. We have 3 strategic pillars, which are community, research, and media. Community is very much connecting with students and staff, who are the people doing the work. Our research is our database. And then media. So we do a lot of media work, breaking down the issues, making the video really accessible so that we can start to help the student movements happening and change public precedent. That, of course, is what takes it from a small marginalized group of people doing the work and into the status quo. When it becomes unacceptable for universities to partner with the defense sector and military, then universities begin to break those ties. And understanding that academia is essential to the military-industrial complex, the impact of universities breaking their ties is therefore the reduction of arms manufacturing and government subsidies to the arms trade. And that, of course, creates educational capacity that can be used for peace building. Now that we have that reset, we are in the engagement phase. Step by step, we're getting closer and we're becoming more knowing within that and engaging the change makers within higher education with the treaty. I think picking holes in university governance is a really, really strong strategy for making them actually pay attention to our demands. Universities are spaces that can transform the world and have transformed the world, from culture to innovation. So higher education capacity should innovate for peace, not war.
Arms trade accounts for around 40% of all corruption in all world. And the point I want to make is that the trade in weapons, which is obviously a central component of military, and I understand militarism as effectively seeing the world through a military mindset and everything to do with the world through that military mindset. And it affects every single dimension of our life. And I think it's incredibly difficult to understand this impact on our lives unless we understand the economics that underpin the trade. What interests me is the way in which this trade reflects the ways in which we're governed and the ways in which our society are organized. But obviously, the more rational consequence of that, which we've been talking about the whole day today, is how everything in our lives become commercialized in its stage of capitalism. And of course, education is not going to be excluded from that. I would strongly suggest, have a look at the film War Child. It is one of the most terrifying things I've seen, in that it shows the British military infiltrating primary school in this country, having fun days with school children, erecting temporary riflery on which these little kids are very excitedly firing huge guns. And if you wonder how we develop this militarist mindset, you need look no further. The crucial role of defense companies in the funding of universities in the drawing up of aspects of curricula, especially in engineering and some of the sciences, recruitment of graduates, research cooperation and partnership, and of course, as investment destinations for universities' capital. Because I spent so long in university trying to avoid the military, which I ultimately did, I'm old enough to see university as places of challenging intellectual inquiry. I think that it's very difficult to play that crucial role in society if you're working with the defense force. But where, through my work, I see these universities as part of the global military industrial complex. And I don't think that universities can play this role without stifling critical and creative thought, which I always thought was at the heart of the education program. We have a situation where all our political parties offer the combination of permanent austerity, forever war, and the complete destruction of our planet in maintaining those two things. And they not only undermine the climate and the planet, but obviously any meaningful notion of justice and equality. Imperialism and capitalism don't just destroy lives, don't just destroy country, but they try and destroy our imagination. They try and destroy our ability for creative thought. So, how do we resist? First way in which we have to resist, especially in the locus of the university, has to be in ensuring the survival of the imagination and of creativity. Because what the ruling elite, both political and economic, because the two are indistinguished, what the ruling elite want us to do is to believe there are no alternatives. And the moment we start believing that is the moment they have triumphed. And I think that that is such a crucial role for the university. And then the second, far more practical way in which we resist, and this is a long-term art, but we see the way in which we're building towards this in the way that demilitarized education works, in the way that so many student groups work, in the way that academics like yourself are writing and researching these issues. We have to get these malfeasant arms companies that really are, in terms of the historical conjuncture we find ourselves at, the belly of the beast. We've got to get them off our campus. And I know that the business people who run your university will see that as a heresy because it makes the process of financing their university so much more difficult. Now, how do we do that? We have to ensure that there is a process of divestment from these companies. And it is students and academics who are in the best place to lead that. But of course, we need to get our universities to divest from them as well. And why do we say that? Because these companies are run appallingly. If it wasn't for the fact that they are the most subsidized companies on the planet to ensure that circle of oiling the wheels of our politics continues to turn, none of them would turn a profit. None of them would. But our government will continue to subsidize to ensure they survive because of their centrality to so-called defense and national security. So again, let's think creatively about how we can undermine their attempts to escape. Their involvement in the curriculum. What private company, let alone a company that is in the business of making the weapons kill, should be drawing up curriculum for departments? And before we get involved in the issues of, oh, well, they're all the economic benefits, just one statistic. For the amount of public subsidy of every job in the defense sector, we could create between 3 and 7 equivalent level jobs in more socially and economically productive sectors. Most obviously renewables and technological education.